Let's talk about a dilemma that I'm sure many artists have. You have a cool idea for a drawing, you immediately get to work, and after much painstaking labor, it turns out like this. If it does turn out like this, then chances are you forgot a very important part of the drawing process: the reference. Now, what exactly is reference in this scenario? Usually it's a photograph or a collection of photographs that you can use to accurately capture the subject or pose that you're trying to draw. But it can also refer to objects that you might have on you in the real world. Take, for example, this yarn ball. Now, before anybody says, "But Christine, using reference is cheating." No, it's not. I promise. And I'm saying this as someone who used to think it was cheating for pretty much my entire childhood. Reference is an important part of the drawing process. In order to capture something and translate it to the canvas as accurately as possible, you're going to need something to look at and study from. And reference is also a key factor in understanding how certain things work, whether that's fabric, texture, color, or shape, among a bunch of other things. As I often say on the channel, reference is your bestie. And for all of the times I've said that phrase on the channel, I've been planning to make a video putting it into practice for some time now. If you're interested both in this topic and also want to see more art-related videos and shenanigans from me, make sure to like and subscribe. We have spaghetti! Oh, also a disclaimer before we begin. This video will be discussing reference as it pertains to character illustration and character design, since that's my forte and I feel more comfortable talking about that subject than I do with, let's say, background art. Which, by comparison, I'm not very good at. I'm going to focus on anatomy, the dynamicness of character poses when they're drawn with reference versus without, and also the folds of the fabric in regards to how the body moves. Even though I'm not claiming to be the be-all, end-all of this topic, and I'm not, I feel more at ease talking about something that is more in my wheelhouse, otherwise I'd just be talking out of a certain place that I probably shouldn't mention on YouTube. Either way though, hopefully you can take away something from this video, and yeah, enough rambling. Here we go! Now let's move on to the moment we've all been waiting for. Sorry. Anyway. For this video, I'm going to do two drawings with the same composition and the same pose, one without reference and one with reference. I would show more examples with different poses, but in the interest of time, I'm sticking to just the one for this video. I am using my character Lark as an example because the pose or poses I'm using as an example made me think of them. And also, coincidentally, today is their birthday, but that's neither here nor there. Even though I'm not using pose reference for one of the drawings, I still had Lark's character sheet to look at in order to avoid shooting myself in the foot. Maybe one of these days I'll do a hardcore difficulty speedrun and forego the character sheet entirely in this specific scenario, but there's a time and a place for everything, and this isn't it. So anyway, let's start off with the first drawing, the one where I'm not using reference at all. Even for the lighting. Also, I know I just said I made an exception for the character sheet, but I still forgot one of the flap thingies on the sleeve of Lark's jacket anyway. Under most circumstances I'd fix it, but considering this is the drawing where no reference is being used, I thought the blunder just makes it even funnier. But before I get sidetracked. I looked briefly at my reference material, and then it was on to work, using absolutely nothing except my memory, the character sheet I had on hand, and my years of experience and knowledge as an artist. As you'll see in a few moments, there's only so much that those things can do for you before you have to look at reference. And no, using drawing reference is not cheating. In fact, it's pretty much mandatory if you want to faithfully translate your ideas onto the canvas. And as someone who spent my entire childhood thinking using reference was cheating, I can kinda understand why some newer or younger artists would think that this is in fact the case. Let's go back in time for a bit. The year was 2012-ish. And I was a tragically oblivious high school student. At this point, I was entirely self-taught and would be until I went to college. And being young and not knowing any better, I avoided using drawing reference like the plague. Sure, I followed along in my art classes, but I didn't understand why all of the information I was learning was so important. Let's just say I was a bit of a nonconformist. But the backbone of my reasoning at the time as to why I thought using reference was cheating could be summed up like this. I was firmly convinced that all of the professionals were capable of making artwork straight from their head, and also that improvement was sorta like one of those memory games. I thought that if I memorized certain things in regards to anatomy and shading and what have you, I could transcend the laws of the creative process and become some sort of art god, and if I knew already what a certain thing would look like without ever needing reference, then that meant I was improving. I'm sure I'm not the only one who thought the same way, but this was really what my thought process boiled down to. However, the only thing I was really doing was just screwing over my own artistic abilities in the long run. And even though I knew sometimes that I had messed up my proportions, I still didn't understand what I was doing wrong. Now, can you get away with drawing out of your head? In theory, yes. I've heard of a couple of people who are capable of doing this, but you need a very, very good knowledge of anatomy, proportions, all that other stuff. Otherwise, your art is gonna look like what you're seeing on screen. And even then, you're bound to screw something up at least once, but that's just my 2 cents. And also, low-key, this is experience talking. I'm not going to talk about the coloring process itself, since that's not why we're here, but I am going to talk about how whether or not you use reference can affect the lighting in your piece. How the lighting turns out in the finished product depends on the light source, or where the light is hitting. Using reference can help you determine where to place shadows and highlights and just give it that more refined look, for lack of a better term. Without it, you're more than likely going to make blunders with the shadow placement, which I did on a couple of occasions with the right sleeve of Lark's jacket and also the right leg below the knee. You may also notice some instances where the light source starts to get a little too ambiguous, namely the tip of the tail and the underside of the jacket. Without reference, the lighting isn't the only thing that's going to suffer. This drawing might look unassuming at first, but upon closer inspection, you'll also see the stiff posture and a few other particularly egregious issues. Both the hands and the way the hands are gripping the metal staff specifically. Even with the very brief study I allowed myself before going into this drawing, I still couldn't save myself from giving Lark an awkward grip. And as a result, it looks like the staff is just barely obeying the laws of gravity. Also, note how small and short the thumbs are in comparison to the rest of Lark's fingers. It's almost as if they're there as an afterthought, as if to say, oh, I still need to give this character opposable thumbs, so the way they're holding the staff is at least somewhat believable. And not gonna lie, that was kind of my thought process during that whole thing. If you couldn't tell, I was in shambles drawing this. I have no idea how I survived like this until college. But that was the drawing without using reference. I'm going to do a side-by-side comparison at the end of this video, but I encourage everyone to keep this first drawing at the front of their minds while I work on the second one. Moving on from the travesty that was the drawing without reference, we're now moving on to the drawing with reference. Here I'm paying close attention to a number of things, from the pose to the folds of the fabric to the lighting. I used 2 sorta similar poses that I found on Pinterest. Praise be to Pinterest. Though I took some more influences from the photo with the person wearing all black. I usually take at least 2 images and put them together for the final product, kinda like photo bashing, except it's not. It's always good to take multiple reference photos and combine them for the final product, because otherwise it just looks like a straight copy of the original reference material, and this is personal preference, but I don't really feel comfortable doing that sort of thing unless it's a study or something. But before I start going off topic, let's go back to my youth, a time where I had questionable views on drawing reference. How exactly did I come around to liking it more than I used to? As you may have guessed, it took me going to college to realize just how useful reference was. I went to art school, which had a number of highs and lows, but I think one of the greater takeaways from my time there was me coming to understand just how valuable drawing reference was. I was probably in my second year of college when I started to understand the importance of using reference. I had this one teacher who would say, well, it's been 7 years since I was in that class, but he'd say something along the lines of, if you're going to draw this particular thing, you need photo reference to understand how it works. Otherwise, it's not going to look like that specific thing. There were multiple classes where we'd have to print out photo reference and bring those pages in, whether that was for group critique or classes where we'd work on our assignments. The major turning point, however, was my 3rd year. In the department I was in, we had a junior thesis project instead of a senior thesis. Every year, the theme for the thesis project would change, and we would have a list of film or book titles, among other things to choose from that pertained to the topic, which we would then have to make a short adaptation of. For me, it was a 16-page comic. And since the story I was adapting, A Tale of Two Cities, took place in the late 18th century, that required me to extensively look at the clothing and architecture and technology of the time. And also, funny enough, our first assignment that year was to produce a total of 100 pages of photo reference. Yeah. I think if I had to pinpoint a specific time where I had the epiphany regarding the importance of reference, it would be that. As I've said, photographic reference is your best bet when you want to learn things like lighting and proportions. Taking stuff from the real world is always a great way to learn these sorts of things, and even if you can't find photographs, you can just find items around the house or study the way that the fabric of, let's say, your shirt moves whenever you bend your arms. Yeah, finding reference material that closely matches your vision of an illustration can be exhausting, and to be honest, that's really the only major gripe I have with reference nowadays. But hey, that's what getting multiple images is for. Referencing other people's art, on the other hand, I can't really recommend it unless you're doing it to study that person's art style. Because for all the reference that's surely being used for that artwork, there are still multiple stylistic factors that can come into play that aren't always a reflection of how that material behaves in the real world. And honestly, one or two slip-ups will likely fall through the cracks. Saying this from experience. Even though using reference will curb the likelihood of that occurring by a lot. And one more very brief tangent. No, it's not your art style. If you're going to break the rules of anatomy, you need to understand how it works first. But back to the topic. When comparing the first drawing to the second one, you can already see that the second drawing, the one that uses a reference, is a lot less stiff than the first one. In one of the original images that I used as reference, the person in the photograph is standing at a bit of a curve, or at least it seems that way from this angle. There's a bit of a relaxed energy to the pose. I also took note of where the light hit the figure in both images, while also having to account for the differences in the shape of the clothing, and also the type of fabric between the original images and the illustration, along with a couple of other things. I also studied how the fabric of the trousers behaves in this image specifically, since I took influence from the way the legs are posed in that image. Also, can we appreciate the improvement in the hands? I feel so accomplished! Oh, before I forget, even though I said I couldn't do more than one drawing for this video for the sake of time, I can show previous artworks that I've done and talk about the reference I used for them. Let's start with another character of mine, Nadia. When I drew her illustration as part of the promotional material for my upcoming webcomic, I looked at two images to use for the pose, paying attention to the way the sword was being held in one image and also how one leg was placed in front of the other in the second image. I also, with the help of Clip Studio Paint's 3D models and the lighting placement tool thingy, please sponsor me, figured out where the shadows were supposed to go. In another illustration for one of my other characters, Peter, I combined two reference images so that one figure was behind the other, as it was an important part of the composition. The transfer of the poses from the reference to the drawing was played straight here more than the other examples I'll be showing, but the same principles apply. To fit in one more example, let's look at one of the drawings I did for the video where I redrew some AI art from a couple of months ago. Early on into the process for this drawing specifically, I changed up the composition. But for both ideas, I pulled up a couple of reference images on hand, combining the two images where necessary so that the pose would be distinct from the sources it pulled from. I will admit I worked with the power of logical reasoning in regards to the lighting, but that was because I already had some understanding of where the light was coming from, the candles behind the character. So I knew that the front of the character would be cast in shadow, although the shadows here are somewhat soft. Even though all of these illustrations are different in composition, they have one thing in common: the use of reference. If I had relied on drawing out of my head for these pieces, I would absolutely have been lost. If you're ever stuck in a pinch and can't remember how something works, you're gonna need reference. Otherwise, your drawing is probably gonna look a bit like this, or like this. But nevertheless, here is the finished drawing with reference used, and I'll be putting up the drawing without reference as well. Hopefully you can take away something from this video. As a matter of fact, there were a couple things I learned during the process as well in regards to anatomical structure in particular. And funny enough, that's one of the things I want to improve on. I've always wanted to talk about the importance of using reference on the channel, because I've said it once and I'll say it again, reference is your bestie. As always, that is going to do it for this video. If you like this video, and again, you want to see more art-related videos and shenanigans from me, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. I post new videos every other Monday, usually about drawing or what have you, but sometimes I dabble in other art-related things as well. If you want to support me further, please check out my other social media accounts as well as my Ko-fi and my Etsy shop, which are all in the description. And lastly, if you made it this far, leave a wave emoji in the comment section below. And yeah, that's about everything. Thanks for watching.